Welcome to your Daily 5 for Wednesday, September 18th, 2024. One thing that I try to make a very sincere effort at is to make sure that if I have criticisms about a company, that I will also credit them when they do something that I think is a good move. And actually, this really isn't necessarily specific to the most recent iPhone, the iPhone 16, which was announced last week? I don't know. Didn't really pay attention, but I know it's within the last couple weeks. And with it came a new dedicated button for using the camera on the phone. I think they're calling it the camera control button. And this is following the addition of what I think they call the action button. Most people call it that, so I'm assuming that's Apple's term for it. The action button, which is a dedicated hardware button that came in with the 14, 15, I don't even know which phone that one came in with. But the important thing here is that Apple, in the last few releases, has been adding buttons to the iPhone after persistent rumors for a number of years that they were considering removing buttons from the phone, which, you know, there's also been a long-standing idea that they have been experimenting and likely have some type of prototype phone that does not have any ports, meaning you would have no way to plug a cable into it. But along with that, this idea of kind of a perfectly sealed phone was also the removal of buttons, or at the very least, the changing of physical buttons into haptic buttons, which I should say, the new camera control button, from what I've read, is a haptic feedback button. It's not a true button, but much the same way as in the trackpads on a lot of, if not all, the Apple laptops now, it is a haptic. It's not really clicking. It feels like it is. It has sensory feedback, but it's not a true button. However, the action button, I believe, is a real button. And either way, it does, I think, point to a better direction for Apple to go in, where they are recognizing that just having everything as a clean, sealed surface is not optimal, and it really isn't the best way to do a user experience. So they are adding, I think, very intelligently, more buttons to the phone, which certainly, if you go back 4 or 5 years, I don't think most people thought that's what Apple was going to do. So I think this is really great. I like the action button, where you can make that button do, I won't say anything, I'm sure there are limitations to it, but from what I have read, I don't have an iPhone, so this is all from reporting and seeing other people use it, that you can map that button to do numerous things that you want it to do, and now that camera control button is specifically dedicated to the camera. Now, I know some people have lamented that they should have made that button remappable as well, but honestly, I think I agree with Apple here, because so many people, one of their core uses of a cell phone is as a camera. I do kind of like the idea that you could develop a muscle memory for that button, that you will always know what that button is doing. You know, you'll get used to it, you'll learn it and memorize it. I think there is a place for dedicated buttons when you are talking about a function that is so central to the device's existence. And that is what most people, let's be honest, really, I mean, they use it for a couple things. Playing music, surfing the web, and taking pictures. And taking pictures is one of the biggest selling points of any modern phone. In fact, you could argue that for most, it is the selling point. Certainly that's what Apple has demonstrated, and I think Google for a long time was doing that too. They're shifting over to AI because, of course, everybody is. But the reality is that most people picking up a new phone, the thing they're going to notice isn't whether it's got a full AI feature set. I mean, some people who are into that will, but most ordinary users, the first thing they want to see is how much better or what has been improved in the camera. And of course the screen, but the screen is kind of a default. Now you just know you're going to get a great screen with almost any top tier cell phone. So it really does come back to the camera. And so I do think that this is actually a really smart move, both in terms of adding a button, not making the action button become a camera control button, which they could have done, but put a specific button for it, and just the fact that Apple is not running away from buttons. Now that doesn't mean they won't all eventually be haptic in some way, but at least for the time being, the positive end is they're not just trying to create a phone where you have to tap and slide and do certain gestures on the side. When they started introducing gestures, I wasn't sure. I mean, Google's done the same thing, and I haven't liked any of these gesture things that most of these companies are doing. So I do like the idea that they still recognize and are supporting the idea of buttons that have certain functions. Doesn't mean it's going to be permanent that way, but it certainly is, I think, a move in a different direction than most people were thinking that Apple was going to go. So, like I said, for a lot of the criticisms that I will level at Apple, Google, Microsoft, other companies, I do like to try to make sure that I'm fair and say, hey, this is actually a smart move. I think it's a good design decision, especially with Apple and their design decisions in the last 5 to 10 years. So I'm really happy to see the camera control button. I think it's a positive sign. And like I said, as much criticism as I level at Apple, credit where it is due. Later.